What's up, everybody? It's Wednesday. You know what that means. It's another co-main event podcast, Patreon live chat. I'm Chad. That's Ben. All of you are the beloved patrons of the co-main event. And a special welcome to everyone who has signed up in the last few days, especially the people who used that 50% off holiday special that we're running. We appreciate you guys signing up, especially to the people who signed up for free trials this week. We appreciate you giving us a shot. Hopefully, you will like what you hear. We will spend the next 60 minutes or so taking questions, comments, and concerns from over on the Patreon page. Thanks to everybody who stopped by to put those in the appropriate comment section over on patreon.com/co-main event. For the new people, Ben Folks puts up a post at a random time on Tuesday, and that is when you want to flock over to patreon.com/co-main event. Get your questions, comments, and concerns in there early and often. And that's what we do the next hour. That's all we're going to do, because if you didn't put those in there, we would just be sitting here staring at each other, which is mostly what we do at other times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ben, folks,
We
how you
will
doing?
do that. Don't think we won't do that.
Someday we're going to have a live chat where we just sit here and stare at each other. Video version, just us staring at each
That's
other.
pretty meta. I think that people would actually kind of, because it'll be like a Saturday Night Live skit where it's like weird and awkward, and then so weird and awkward it's funny, and then so weird and awkward it's not funny anymore, and then funny again.
Performance art.
Yeah, that's how I've always thought of us. Okay, I'm vexed a little bit on the first this week because the first comment I see, according to Patreon, is Chris Armstrong. But he does not give any indication that he knows or believes or perhaps just cares that he is first.
Okay. I mean, I kind of admire that approach, honestly.
Yeah, you would. Chris Armstrong writes, "Fellas, I guess you guys heard there's no way Dana will ever make that Pereira Jones fight. Jones is too big. No way, no how. A wrestler like Jones? I mean, unless they both say please, in which case he's for sure going to do just that. Shit." Now, here's one of the things I was thinking about with this, because somebody in my mailbag over on Uncrowned this week asked about, what I thought was the likely next steps here for Jones and Aspinall and that whole thing. I still stand by my belief that what happens next is John Jones tries to stand by his negotiating position where he says, "Call me when you're ready to add some zeros, and I'll fight Tom Aspinall." And the UFC says, "Okay, go home and think about it." And 3 months goes by. Maybe there's some conversation back and forth between them. I think the UFC is reluctant to add those zeros, both because they like to have all the money, but also because they don't want that precedent. I think they're genuinely more concerned about that they don't want people thinking, hey, for the really good fights, you can charge us more money than what you're contracted to receive. But I also think that they'll try to just talk John Jones into it and maybe start to gradually up the public pressure on him to do it. Like, you could see little hints of it where Dana White was saying, John will give Tom Aspinall his shot. When he
Yeah.
was young, somebody gave him the shot.
He'll do the honors, in other
Yeah.
words.
And I think that will probably only increase as Dana White keeps making appearances at press conferences in the months to come. And that maybe it'll get a little less friendly. Maybe it'll be like, hey, we think John's going to do the right thing to, like, I don't know, maybe John's just reached a point where he feels like he's over the hill. He can't do it against these young guys anymore. If that's how he feels, then fine, we'll respect that. And I do think at some point it'll be shit or get off the pot, fight Tom Aspinall or give up that heavyweight belt. And maybe John Jones will be like, fine, I'll give up the heavyweight belt. And can I fight Alex Pereira then? First of all, I think if they turn around and they do big Tommy Aspinall gas hands against TBD for the legitimate UFC heavyweight title, John Jones will be at home watching it with his tweeting hand ready. And I don't think he'll like it. I don't think
Yeah.
he'll like to see somebody else get to walk around calling himself heavyweight champion. I also, though, if you're the UFC, maybe you feel like you're running out of ideas for Alex Pereira, and so you start to gradually become more open to the idea of John Jones versus Alex Pereira. But what then of your light heavyweight title? Does John Jones go back to being light heavyweight champ? He's already shown you that maybe he's not the most reliable heavyweight champ at this point when it comes to taking on all comers? Do you think that you have him just come down and fight at light heavyweight? Do you think we're basically doing a catch weight for the BMF title? And what does that mean if John Jones goes out there, takes Alex Pereira down, elbows him in the head, and submits him or whatever? Then you've got a light heavyweight champ who we just saw get demolished by the last light heavyweight champ of any standing. Like, I don't know. I think that the UFC might look askance at that. And yet at the same time, if you could make a John Jones fight, you're going to make some money. Yeah. Right? So they like that money.
They do like money. That is one thing we know conclusively about the UFC. All right. You have raised a lot of possibilities in that answer. One thing, I don't even know that if I believe what I'm about to say.
Okay. I love it when that happens.
One thing that I started thinking last night and this morning, if you are John Jones and you're already going to make the UFC mad, right? One way or another, unless you go to the UFC headquarters today and sign a contract to fight Tom Aspinall, you are essentially resigning yourself to a contract negotiation, right? Would it actually be savvy and strategic for John Jones right now to relinquish the heavyweight title? Would it be kind of crafty for him just to come out and vacate? Because if you do that, then a fight with Tom Aspinall kind of doesn't make sense anymore. Because the fight with Tom Aspinall is entirely predicated on unifying the heavyweight title. So, aside from the fact that you have just made the UFC mad, would it be worthwhile for John Jones to do that? Because it essentially draws a straight line between you and Alex Pereira. Now, that said, one of the reasons that makes a fight with Tom Aspinall most likely, in my opinion, is merely the fact that Dana White has said that's what we're going to do, right? Dana White will say a lot of untrue shit, as we know. Most of the things that come out of his mouth are untrue. But when he says something like this, for example, when he says something like John Jones will fight Stipe Miocic next, he gets this like stubborn steadfastness, like he almost wants to prove a point, right? So that is one of the things that makes me think that the UFC will really push for a Tom Aspinall fight. But if you are John Jones, do you just sit home in Albuquerque and say, you know what? I won it. I proved my dominance. I don't need it anymore. You go ahead and take this heavyweight title and do what thou willst.
But, okay, because there's what I'm willing to believe John Jones thinks he would do, or thinks like a decision he thinks he could be happy with, and then what he would think 6 months later.
Sure.
And Dana White seems to understand that about him. He said several times before this, like, what'll happen is John will go home and then he'll get the itch to compete again, and then we'll hear from him. And so I think that if John Jones were to kind of try to, as you put it, draw some straight lines between him and Alex Pereira, the UFC, if they didn't really immediately want to do that, would just be like, we'll wait him out.
Yeah.
We'll wait him out. He'll go crazy. He'll get arrested again. Then he'll come crawling back, be like, hey, could I do something to maybe replace those bad headlines with some good ones? How about you let me fight somebody? The other thing is that if you relinquish that heavyweight title and say, I'm not any form of UFC champ anymore, how about give me this fight? And then they say no, then your choices are continue on into retirement, still under contract, by the way, or come back and take a fight, and this time not guaranteed you'll get points on the pay-per-view because you're not coming in with a UFC title.
Okay, that is a good point. You give up the championship, you don't get the pay-per-view points anymore. You know what would serve John Jones well right now? You know what would be real handy if he had it was a sunset clause. Because then imagine if there was a sunset clause and John Jones could sit at home with the UFC heavyweight title, get out of his contract, and then go fight Francis Ngannou somewhere. Two guys who can both lay claim to being UFC heavyweight champion could fight for the #1 spot in the world heavyweight rankings. and whatever made up, awkwardly named championship PFL would want to put on the line.
World Universe champion of the Super Fight Night.
Yeah.
Neil asked, how prominently displayed in the folks' abode is the Stingiest Stinger trophy? Now, it has moved around a little bit because I used it to wake up my children. I used its rainbow strobe effect early in the morning to wake up my children. I'm already worried that I'm going to either damage this trophy in my 1 week with it or just forget to bring it. So I'm trying to just tell myself over and over again, don't forget to bring it. Don't leave it anywhere where it might get damaged, because I don't want to be the guy who fucks it up. And I'm going to say this, the trophy, it doesn't exactly seem like it's in pristine condition as it is. Like, it seems like it's probably been through some stuff. So I'm trying mainly just to keep it safe so that I can bring it and then present it. A lot of responsibility to decide who to give it to next week. Here's the thing that's going on with the Stingers team, though. I'll tell you this. We're good, Chad. We're a good team.
Okay.
We are solid all around. We got several difference maker players on offense and defense. This is a team that has no weak spots except...
Whoa, no, wait, no known weaknesses?
No known weaknesses except in goal, which is a big one to have.
Yeah.
Now, I worry a little bit that our goalie might be starting to think that he is good.
Oh, no.
He has allowed only 2 goals through 3 games, which normally that'd be pretty good, you know? But it's because we are really limiting shots. He has not faced many shots. The 2 goals he let in, neither one of them was on really a good shot. He will stop a couple every once in a while where you're like, I'm surprised he stopped that one. So he's got that going for him a little bit. But really the success is that we get out there, we get after people, we play in their end, and we don't give them any good looks at goal. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm thinking, though, already, you look at the team that we have assembled. If this team does not win a championship, we'll have some soul searching to do.
Wow, that's a big expectation to have this early in the season.
Yeah, I said it.
Could this be a you need to bring in a new goalie type situation? You need to go find your own Joey Daccord, or is that a thing that you don't do
You
at
can't
this level?
do that. You can't unless your goalie gets injured or something. You got to dance with who brung you. And, also, I almost think that this is fair. This is fair for the league, for us to have this goalie and everybody else that we have.
Maybe a little confidence isn't the worst thing for the guy. You think?
It's
a little swagger.
There's a point. There's a point where the little bit of confidence will make you a better goaltender, and then a little bit more than that will make you awful. That's what I think.
Okay.
Cody Burnson says, what would the career of Jon Jones look like if he never had disqualified himself from competition and had all of his various legal indiscretions? Assuming he never had taken years off his career, would we be on his 2nd or 3rd comeback? Would he have retired never having moved up to heavyweight? Or would he have encountered a prime Stipe that would have given him a more competitive fight? Or would he simply have retired as one of the best to ever do it, and we never really hear from him much again outside of the random appearances at UFC events? Ha, yeah, that wouldn't happen. LYBE, Cody Burnson.
Wow. That is both a provocative question and one that I feel like is impossible to answer because those indiscretions have so completely altered his career that I think it's hard to say. I think one of the things that we could guess is that he would have gone on being very dominant against people that he would have run up against during those years. But at the same time, maybe you give the universe a lot more opportunities to trip you up in that case. I don't know. Like, I'd love to think that there was an alternate universe where we could go peer into it and see what life would be like at that point. But I don't know, man. I feel like it's almost hard for me to imagine such a reality because it is so untethered from what we know.
Yeah. And that it's hard to think of Jon Jones as he is without also thinking of the parts that make him the guy who is in various ways going to disqualify him from competition. Those seem to kind of go together in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one from Feder Gothard I want to make sure that we talked about. Hey, gents, I've been thinking about the was Tyson Paul a sham discourse a little bit. Helwani came out pretty strong against the idea, and on yesterday's proper, you guys seem to agree, your stance being that everybody basically should have known what they were getting into with this one. The question I'm mulling over since Maymac is, are we absolving promoters of selling us fights that, at their core, are based on a big fat lie? I think at the end of the day, a majority of the vast audiences of Maymac, Tyson Paul, etc. got conned into thinking these would actually be competitive and or exciting fights. Maybe not the most unethical thing to ever happen in the history of fighting, but it still doesn't sit right with me. Clay Davis may take any motherfucker's money if he's giving it away, but that doesn't make him any less of a sleazebag, right? I get the point that Feder Gothard is making here, but
Yeah.
I also think, again, there is a difference between Mayweather and McGregor offering you up this boxing match that cost $100 on pay-per-view, and Tyson and Paul being like, the shit is on Netflix. If you got Netflix, it's you just turn it on at the time. Even if you don't have Netflix, you can sign up and you get a month subscription at least for free. So I do think that matters, that what they're asking you to give for what you're getting is part of the calculation you have to ask yourself. But also, I think fight promoters get to try to sell you anything they think you'll buy. And it is up to you to be a discerning viewer or to at least learn your fucking lesson at some point. And I like, there's a reason these same fight promoters, like we were talking about, if they could make this much money just giving you Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, they would do that.
Yeah.
But they can't, because you won't buy it. Because like the public will not get down with that on the same level and that at the same numbers as they would for something like Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. So they are following the dictates of the market. And if that's what people want, rather than what we claim to want, they're going to give you what you will actually show up for. And so if we're mad about what they're giving us, then we should show up for different shit.
Yeah. I mean, this is some more alternate universe shit, right? Like, this is almost hard to imagine a world where fight promoters weren't scumbags.
Yeah.
Like, it would totally revolutionize everything we have ever known about combat sports going back at least 150 years. So I don't even know what to say about that. And again, like, Jake Paul and Mike Tyson both made a shitload of money, which, unless you are opposed to those guys making money just because they are both also probably scumbags, I would argue is kind of a positive outcome from this thing, right? Like, we like it when the fighters get paid. They're the ones out there doing the labor. I'd rather have them keep the money than the scumbag promoters. So I'm not necessarily sure that this is all that bad of an outcome, right? From a fan perspective, I suppose it would be great if bullshit fights were not the most popular thing in combat sports. And in fact, when I run for president, perhaps one of my guarantees will be an executive order called "No More Bullshit Fights."
Wow.
Here's I don't know, maybe I don't understand the inner workings of this thing, but like, where does the money come from? Right? Like, obviously they made a shitload of money on the gate. Like, I'm sure a bunch of people signed up for Netflix to probably watch this fight. But other than that, like, where does the money come from?
Netflix.
Yeah,
Paying
but
you up front.
sure. Yeah. I know that. But like, how is that worthwhile for Netflix? Just to raise awareness? Like, everybody knows what Netflix is.
Yeah, I'm sure that some of it is getting some new subscribers, but also sort of trying to change people's minds to start to think of Netflix as more than just a place where you can watch movies and shows, but that they're a broadcaster, basically.
Sure.
That this is a sort of soft launch into sports.
Right. So
And
kind of like a loss leader, in other
Yes.
words. Like, having the NFL or WWE makes sense, or frankly, the UFC, because those are ongoing things, right? If you want to watch whatever NFL games Netflix has, you probably are going to sign up for Netflix and then just let it ride, because there will be more NFL games. Whereas Jake Paul and Mike Tyson was kind of a one-off thing. So, I mean, obviously you're right. Like, they're doing this to try to like transform themselves into a live streaming platform instead of just like where you go to watch your shows. But yeah, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to pay out for this fight for whatever the return was.
Sunny Weather says, top 10 comment, but pound for pound number one comment, according to AI. Doesn't Dana know he can make the UFC rankings whatever he wants? Also, isn't he kind of shitting on Makachev by saying how bullshit the rankings are? And you really had to type over Tom's name in the tweet? What a fucking goof. Also, with all the Jones disrespect coming from the fans, are we setting ourselves up for a James Grim Reaper Roper versus Terry Conklin type of fight? Now, that, for anybody who doesn't recognize it, is a reference to the Great White Hype, which, again, we've watched a few different fighting oriented movies and shows for various CME properties and spin off podcast stuff that we've done over the years. The two things, if you were going to tell somebody, like, somebody says, I want to watch some movies that'll teach me about what the fight game is, what it really is, what should I watch? The two I would say you watch are The Great White Hype and The Harder They Fall, the Humphrey Bogart joint that we watched that time.
Yeah.
Those two movies will tell you everything you need to know about how this business, how this world actually works, and how the fans and media and everybody interact with it. Like, it's all written right there in those two movies. The Dana White's AI thing, again, I think yet another thing that Dana White shares with Donald Trump is he a lot of times would rather complain about a problem that he can blame on somebody else than he would address the problem. He loves to complain. He loves to be able to blame somebody else. He has this, that's the media goofs that aren't even really media. He can just keep battering them, being like, look at these media people. They keep fucking up the rankings. It's not my fault. It's them. They keep fucking up the rankings. And keep talking to Zuckerberg, making a story out of it. Like, oh, we got to get these AI rankings going on. And if the AI machine spit out a number that he didn't like, spit out a list that he didn't like, he'll go in there and change it. But then the problem is, once you're doing your own rankings, whether you're doing them through AI, whether you're doing them by just coming out with your own rankings, then you don't have anybody to blame anymore. Who are you going to yell at? Who are you going to call goofs?
This AI goof, this computer goof.
You're the one who created the AI, right?
Zuckerberg, this goof.
You don't want to pick a fight with Zuckerberg.
No, you don't.
So I think that makes it less attractive to him. And yeah, he is kind of like, if you're Islam Makhachev, you're just sort of looking at that and you're just being like, what the fuck, man? Is that so dumb? Is it so incredibly stupid that I might be number one? What the
Much
hell?
like Dana White saying that he thinks politics are disgusting and he can't wait to get out of them. Mm-hmm. Calling the rankings voters goofs is a borderline Tim Robinson in a hot dog suit situation, right? We're all looking around for the guy who did this. Like, this has been the UFC ranking system for years, and it's not like all of the legitimate voters just bailed, right? All of the legitimate voters bailed real quick. And so the UFC has had a panel of goofs for years. And now suddenly Dana White logs on, he enters the chat, sees some stuff he doesn't like on the rankings, and now suddenly everyone's goofs and we got to get a computer to do it. And Mark Zuckerberg's going to come in and everything like that. First of all, I saw someone point this out online. Jon Jones has fought twice in the last 4 years. So that is as big a hit against his number one pound for pound status as anything else. Why is Dana White so insistent that Jon Jones be the number one pound for pound fighter in the world? Is it just because Jon Jones is probably the biggest draw the UFC has left? Is it because he actually thinks that? Is it a hangover from the Francis Ngannou incident? Like, it kind of doesn't make sense to me, except that as he gets older, Dana White seems to obsess over these small, insignificant things more and more. It's almost like, as we have discussed in the past, he's so bored now with his job as CEO and president of the UFC that he's just like sitting around in his office, refreshing the rankings and getting mad.
Yeah. And it just seems like something to yell about, We know he loves that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it does create an extra narrative for the UFC for people to talk about.
And then if he ever has a beef with the media over something different, he could be like, these are the same goofs that come up with the rankings, even though they are different goofs. I think he likes that too. Tim A says, first Australian. Thanks to the wonders of YouTube, my 7-year-old son insisted I take him magnet fishing last weekend. No, now I've seen some of those videos and I was a little excited about what we might find. After losing a magnet and finding nothing for the first hour, I was ready to head home and mow the lawns, still not done and scheduled for more rain this weekend. We moved on to the next spot. After over an hour there, we found some flakes of rust and a bit of wire. He was ecstatic with this load of rubbish and is already planning our next trip. Now, should I keep with the current setup and buy a couple of soda pops to keep myself entertained, or invest that money in a bigger magnet to catch something I could get excited about? Love from your favorite Australian tree surgeon and son. Now, Nikki Spliff notes that says, I've heard a lot of the magnet fishing videos are fakes. They preload the magnets and pretend to pull cool stuff out. Am I the only one who has no idea what we're talking about with fucking magnet fishing?
I have no idea what magnet fishing is. Do
I
you
think I
take
can
a
kind of
magnet and like
imagine.
do you drag a magnet through a stream or body of water and come up with whatever you get?
Also, like, what do you think is going to be down there that would be cool?
All right, here's two things that I would say to this. Number one, I know I've told this story on the podcast before, but after we got our roof replaced several years ago, the roofers came and did it in the middle of winter. So there was tons of snow out there. And perhaps as a result, they didn't clean up any of the mess. And so the following spring, I went to Harbor Freight and I bought a rolling magnet, like a basically it looks like a push broom, but it's a magnet with wheels. And you wheel it over your yard and it picks up all of the like loose metal in the yard. And man, I collected like half of a gallon Ziploc bag full of nails and screws and other like razor blades and other like dangerous shit out of my yard. But it was, there was something soothing about it. And so I kind of understand maybe the appeal of magnet fishing, but I would also say, man, if you are interested in magnet fishing, let me tell you about a little something called metal detecting.
Yeah, we
Because
will get into that.
if you want to get into an old man style hobby, go get yourself a metal detector and like a spade, a little shovel, and go out there and just metal detect to your heart's content, man.
Now, first of all, a quick Google tells me that, of course, there is a subreddit r/magnet fishing. People are posting pictures of the stuff that they have pulled up out of bodies of water with magnets. Almost all the stuff I'm seeing, though, why would you want it? Because it
Same
is.
with metal detecting. Like if that's what you're into, man, go get it.
I mean, I would see, especially when I lived in Southern California, when I lived in San Diego, you'd see people out on the beach with metal detectors. And I would think that mainly, other than just like making the hours pass, what they are hoping is somebody lost a diamond ring out here at a day at the beach, 6 weeks ago, and I'm gonna find it because I got the metal detector. It'll be worth something. And there's something to at least the thinking there. If you pull it up out of the water, it's probably not going to be in the greatest of shape because it's been down there. And it's like people, they on this subreddit, they seem excited where they're like 3 spoons and a few lighters and an old pocket knife, and you're like, and it all looks like it's been on the bed of a creek for years. So what the hell? Then it just seems like now it's your problem to figure out how to get rid of this junk. But I could see how, especially for a 7-year-old, this would be interesting.
Yeah.
And so my advice to Timmy would be, hey, if the kid gets excited about it, I don't think you have to worry that you're going to be in a years long magnet fishing thing here. I think he'll probably get tired of it at some point, but what he'll remember is that his dad kind of took a yes and approach to something he was interested in and said, yeah, sure, let's go. He got outside, he got to do something. The world was full of wonders because he was 7 years old. He never knew what you might find, and that's the part that he'll remember, and that's the part that's important. And you know, a soda pop or two maybe wouldn't help you out. Just enjoy being outside and being out there for the day. It does remind me though, in a recent New Yorker, they had a fascinating article about a dude who is a sort of like a British dude who is a shipwreck expert and helps various treasure hunters who are trying to bring stuff up from these shipwrecks, and a fascinating sort of life to live that I didn't even know was possible. Didn't even know there's a person out there. But it's like if you think you found a shipwreck or you think you're in the neighborhood of a shipwreck somewhere out in the ocean, you contact this guy And basically, for a fee, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, no, there was a Dutch and a Spanish ship that fought over there. There should be one right here, and if you go a couple miles up to the northwest, there should be two more down there." And sure enough, he'll be right about it.
And I have already voiced my love of treasure hunting shows on this podcast. I love a treasure hunting shows, and there are some dynamite, sunken treasure, shipwreck treasure hunting shows out there.
Red Shack guy says, "I've been watching UFC for around 5 years, and I have to say Charles Oliveira is my favorite fighter. Every fight he is in is just awesome as hell. He seems to just absolutely know what it takes to win an MMA fight. Also, he was the only fighter to not grovel to Trump at 309. In fact, he walked right past the orange fuck without stopping. Do Bronx forever."
I mean, Charles
All
Oliveira
good points.
is a very solid choice for your favorite fighter. That's just
Yeah.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's a dynamite choice.
Matthew Ryder asks, "When in history has a sporting entity ever been politicized to such an extent? It would be hilarious if it wasn't so insane. By God, it's Tulsi Gabbard." If you guys want to move to Canada, I can probably stow you away for a bit until border authorities stop getting suspicious. I mean, we've already talked a little bit about how we felt about it, and it's so off-putting, and it is just strange for a professional sports company to just be so excited about a politician.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
even policies or anything or a political party necessarily, but just a politician.
Yeah.
And like, it's surprising to me all the time. Fighters do it, fans do it, and just like, you'll see people here in Missoula driving around with their trucks where they got like a Trump flag in the back, and you're just like, do you not realize how fucking dorky you look? You're just so excited about a billionaire politician who doesn't give a fuck about you, who would step over your dead body in the street without giving it a second thought.
Yeah.
How lame is that?
Yeah. I mean, sports have always been politicized, but I can't remember someone courting it quite like the UFC has done here lately. And the funny part is, conservatives are like, "Oh, they've been doing this, liberals and other sports." Yeah. Like the quote unquote political statements that other organizations have been making is like the NFL putting end racism in the back of the end zone, right? On the end line in the back of the end zone. So it's not really comparable. Not really comparable stuff happening out there.
Now, the Jesse White Deer says, "Bless up, Kings. So your boy Eric Anders broke his silence and said he got food poisoning on Friday, which put him out for his fight with rubber leg Chris Weidman on Saturday. If we were to wildly speculate, what food do you think put him out of commission? Was he afraid that he would either break Chris Weidman's leg checking a kick or have his own leg broken in some Looney Tunes ass debacle? Is Uriah Hall destined to roam this earthly plane, the keeper of the leg breaking curse? In times like these, it's good to see your beautiful faces. Thanks for reading my question. Best wishes. Warm regards, your pal from Oklahoma, the Jesse White Deer." Now, food poisoning, especially you get food poisoning on Friday, like after the weigh-ins, it does make me go, okay, what'd you do?
Yeah.
Like
chicken shawarma from a guy pushing a cart down the street in Times Square.
See, I mean, I could honestly see it if that was how, because it's like, you cut that weight, you went through the misery of cutting the weight, everything, you finally made the weight, you're so relieved. You just have weird ass food cravings that you otherwise wouldn't eat. Also, your body's in this sort of depleted state. You walk by that cart, it smells so good.
Yeah.
That thing will make you sick sometimes under the best of circumstances if your body is completely prepared for it.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Street vendor. If I had to guess, that's how Eric Anders got food poisoning. How are these fighters in a position where they are putting anything in their bodies besides what they bring with them in the year of our Lord 2024? Like, I know the answer, but it kind of surprises me that we haven't gone to a pure, like, I bring all of my own meals in order to get me ready for the fight kind of situation.
I mean, you do know the answer, and the answer is money, money, money.
And you're dealing with fighters.
Yeah. Well, and then, they're like, well, the per diem will cover this halal street cart food, and I'll still have some left over.
That's right. Yeah, put the styrofoam container in the dorm fridge in your kitchen or your hotel room and eat it after you crack up Chris Weidman.
Shano says, howdy, gents. As the inspiration for not one, but two doing the damn thing topics in the past, no big deal, I'd like to suggest a tip for the well rounded fight fan. A film called Kneecap. It is a pseudo-biopic film about Irish language rappers slash drug dealers from West Belfast. Well, you're speaking our language already.
Oh yeah, I think I listened to some of these guys' tunes a while back.
A thoroughly fun watch, which was given a glowing review by the big homie Vince Mancini and now available on Amazon Prime. Along with the Six Nations doc and the Kevin Barry novel, you may start to notice a vague theme to these suggestions that even Sir Nigel would be proud of. LYBE and YNWA. All right, you know what? I mean, you haven't steered us wrong yet.
Yeah.
And everything I've heard so far, both about the topics and that Vince Mancini liked it, speaks highly of it.
Yeah, I'm down to watch a documentary about Irish hip hoppers. Why not?
Okay, here's where things are going to take a turn. Bixby Snyder says, has Michael Chandler ever been any good? Some would say he's an oversized featherweight who has only beaten smaller sized lightweights. Some would say his best skill is the art of Dandasso and waiting on fights. Some would say, but not me. Now, Neil notes Bellator Chandler was appointment viewing. Win or lose,
Yeah.
his fights were bangers, which I'd still say is mostly true. It's
Yeah.
just that he's losing more of them.
Yeah. I mean, during those prime years of Michael Chandler during Bellator, when he was like having that fight of the year candidate with Eddie Alvarez, and you know, fighting the back when Bellator was still a relevant thing. I feel like Michael Chandler was both pretty good and a guy you had to watch. Now he's a guy that you have to watch who's doesn't seem like he can keep it up with the elite of that division.
I was surprised when I went and looked it up recently to remember that Michael Chandler's 38 years old.
Yeah.
And 38 at lightweight is different than 38 at heavyweight. You know, it's kind of impressive that he's still maintained relevance for this long. But I also think, you know, the UFC clearly likes Michael Chandler. You put a guy out there who presents himself fairly well and will give you exciting fights even if he loses them. He's been accused of having that Dana White privilege in the past. I think that the UFC does not look at that loss to Charles Oliveira and be like, well, we can't do any business with Michael Chandler anymore.
Yeah, the UFC would way more gladly have a guy who loses a fight and stands up with the other guy on his back in the last seconds and yells "fuck it" and slams himself back on the mat than they would say a Bilal Muhammad type.
Yeah.
Right.
Connor Lewandowski says, just saw they announced Eddie Alvarez versus Jeremy Stevens in BKFC January 25th in Philly at the Wells Fargo Center. The very same Wells Fargo Center that hosts the 76ers and Flyers. I've attended the last two UFC events there, and while the capacity is roughly 19,000, the lower levels weren't even full for those events. Call me pessimistic, but I can't exactly see the city turning out in droves for a BKFC event, even if it is for Philly's most accomplished MMA fighter. So I ask you, what's BKFC thinking here? Are they just being naive? Do they not feel like a mostly empty arena is a bad look for the broadcast? Or am I just 4 weeks early to when they announce a change in venue due to low ticket sales? You know, I don't know if it's going to be like a standing room only crowd, but for one thing, BKFC event's probably going to be a lot cheaper to attend than the UFC event there. Isn't David Feldman a Philly guy? He's either Philly or Pittsburgh. I know he's a Pennsylvania guy.
Okay.
So this is a big one for him. And I'm sure part of his thinking is he was trying to get sanctioned and regulated in Pennsylvania for a while. And I think he told me that they at times had told him to go fuck himself. But then as BKFC is starting to get around a little more and getting a little more legitimacy, and once they see other athletic commissions in other states approving it, like once you can do it in California, then a lot of these other state commissions go, okay, well, now at least they have cover for doing it. Like they don't risk doing it, having something bad happen, and people going, what the fuck were you possibly thinking doing bare knuckle? They can be like, look at all the other places that have done bare knuckle. And I'm sure if he's kind of coming home with a BKFC event, he wants to do it big and show people, look, here's what your boy has been doing. It's not some small potato shit that I got to do at a tiny venue somewhere.
Yeah.
And you got Eddie Alvarez, who will bring in, I would think, some fans there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they don't sell it out even with cheap ticket prices, but I think that they get a respectable showing.
First of all, when I saw this fight float across my timeline last night, I said out loud, I knew it. Right? Because we talked about this with Jeremy Stevens.
Yeah.
I bet, they've probably done the math. Maybe they'll have to move to a smaller venue, but I would assume they're just going to trash bag off part of the arena and herd everyone into seats that make it look okay on whatever they're broadcasting on, and just let it fly.
Yeah. Okay, here there was one. David E. Lauderay is going to come in here. There's an emoji, but I can't for the life. Okay, I think it's maybe a person like sitting down in like a meditative position kind of emoji that starts it off. And he says, "So my wife has an assortment of yoga type leggings. She has more of that style of pant than I just have clothes, period. These leggings have always been sorted in the following way: active drawer and lounge drawer. Mind you, they look identical. However, some are for exercising and some are for lounging about. As I was folding the laundry like a strong, independent Democrat male does, what I asked which drawer a particular ambiguous legging belonged in, active or lounge. Neither, she replied. Those are pants. They go in the pant drawer. A third drawer option. A third drawer, Chad. Those are leggings. This is called gaslighting what you're doing, I bravely said. Those are leggings for going out, not lounging and not working out, she said, without even a hint of joking or irony. At this point, I felt a stroke coming on. Is my wife insane? Am I insane? Will Bo Nickel ever be a UFC champ?
I mean, this is what people wear now, man.
Yeah.
It's all about wearing your comfy pants out in the world, which I, as an old man, am steadfast in my absolute vow that will never happen to me. I'm going to be wearing the most uncomfortable pants that I can possibly find out in the world. I kind of get it. I kind of get it from where David E. Lauderay's wife is coming from. God knows I make various divisions in my own wardrobe.
Yeah.
Along this same lines. And so I'm not going to hate. I'm not going to hate on that. And also, Bo Nickel does not become a champ.
Ever? Not
We'll
ever?
see. We'll see. I mean, he didn't look like it out there against Paul Craig, right?
No. Even though he's the last person who is going to be convinced that it was not an absolutely phenomenal performance by him.
I mean, he did it on purpose. He had a bad fight on purpose, according to Bo Nickel.
I've definitely done the thing too with my own clothes where I'm just like, and which I realize would be baffling to somebody else if I had to try to explain it. Where I'd be like, no, that's not a nice t-shirt.
Yeah.
But it's also not a t-shirt that you can just do fucking anything in. Like I'm not gonna trash this t-shirt by going out and doing yard work or something in it. But it's also like it's not an A-lister.
Yeah.
And in reality, they are all fucking just cotton ass t-shirts.
I have 2 different Kraken hoodies. One I only wear around the house, and one I will wear when I go outside.
I had a moment of horror a couple weeks ago where I was out with my kids and the dog, a little hike, and a woman jogged past us. And as she did, she said, sincerely, not poking fun of me or anything, she said, "Go Kraken."
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, am I wearing Kraken? And then I realized I was wearing a Kraken sweatshirt and a Kraken hat.
Yeah.
Like,
see,
oh no.
That's why you got to have multiple hats, man.
I do have multiple hats. I just didn't even think about it.
I got
even think about it.
I got a hat that I only wear to the gym. I got a Kraken hat that I'll wear out in fair weather. I've got like a wool baseball cap that I'll wear when it's a little bit blustery out. And then I got this Grizz hat that I'm wearing right now that I essentially only wear to Grizz games or when recording the co-main event podcast during Cat Week. It's Cat Week. Fuck the cats.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about how optimistic you're feeling about Cat Week. This week's doing the damn thing.
Tune in on Thursday.
Nikki Spliff says, "I think I'm done watching UFC for a little while. I have a pretty strong constitution for dealing with the overwhelming conservative tilt in the UFC. But seriously, like half the scary cabinet was there with Trump, and he showed him and whatever goblins he was with every 3 minutes. Plus, they were in the shot every fight. Then all the fighters went and praised him afterwards like actual slave gladiators. By the time John Jones did the Trump dance, I was just fully in a sad place about the next 4 years and not even thinking about a pretty good night of fights. My question is this: what's worse? Having your night ruined by Trump or find out that some black people are terrible at dancing? Oh. I bet Jones doesn't even listen to hip hop or R&B. He's just got one Kid Rock song and Imagine Dragons whole catalog on his iPhone. And also notes, also a CME asks the next 4 years, I'm not telling people I'm non-binary. Instead, I just say I lost my fantasy league, and the punishment is I have to wear dresses and act queer until the Raiders win the Super Bowl. Love all you. Okay, the thing about every time I see Trump roll out a new cabinet member, that's RFK or Linda McMahon or Matt Gaetz, whatever, I think of the I think you should leave. I think it's one of the I think you should leave sketches. It's definitely one of the Tim Robinson thing where he has the skateboarding
Yeah.
company and the advertisement where at the beginning where he says our skateboard company is the only company where every single member of the team is a bad person in real life. That's our promise to you. And
Mhm.
it's like that's what he's doing. He's
Yeah.
intentionally being like, I have assembled a team of comically dumb supervillains, and they will all lead whatever branch should probably be prosecuting them personally. And that is, and it's got to be an intentional thing to see both like what he can get away with as you start this new term, and also to sort of flex his own power just so he knows it's there.
Yeah. I mean, it was the ultimate prod the system to see what I can get away with when he tried to get the Senate to not have a confirmation process for any of them, right? When he
Yes,
asked,
just
didn't ask, demanded that the Senate go into recess so he could just appoint whoever he wanted and they wouldn't have to approve any of the people. Honestly, these cabinet appointments are like a Saturday Night Live skit. This is like some shit that you would make up in a fake world to lampoon a second Trump presidency. And frankly, it would be hilarious if so many people weren't going to die.
yeah. Yeah. That makes it a lot less hilarious. Joe L says, in recognition of this past weekend's main events, what's the saddest you've been after watching a fight? For me, it's probably either Liddell versus Franklin or Couture versus Machida. Two fights that didn't need to happen, ending in the most predictable, brutal way possible. Now, Neil notes Bigfoot dominating Fedor like Thanos did Hulk in Infinity War gave me a big sad. The Verdun loss felt fluky, but this felt like the end. Yeah, you know what? I kind of scrubbed that one from my memory to a large extent, but that was one because it was just like Bigfoot just sort of brutalized him. We didn't think Bigfoot was good, but he was big. But that was the kind of shit that Fedor was doing on New Year's Eve in Japan for years and winning. And this one, he just got fucking beat up, roughed up from start to finish. And we all had to be like, okay, so the era of Fedor, the unbeatable cyborg, is officially over. And for what? What did you get out of it?
UFC 46,
Oh, wow.
January 2024. I was at a particularly low point in life. You know how when you're going through a rough patch in life, sports starts to take on a larger meaning in your life? You're like looking forward to it more. You're sort of like, oh, at least I have this thing that I can go do. I was looking forward to UFC 46 because Randy Couture was going to fight Vitor Belfort. And I was like, Randy Couture will absolutely ragdoll and defeat Vitor Belfort once again, thereby providing me with a personal triumph of a Saturday night. And this was the one where right at the beginning of the fight, Vitor Belfort sliced Randy Couture's eye, basically, his eyelid,
Yeah.
with the seam of his glove with a punch that did not even land. And Randy Couture lost, and Vitor Belfort became the champion. And one of the last scenes that they showed on the pay-per-view was a blood spattered Randy Couture sadly walking out of the arena with his wife,
His then wife.
his then wife,
Yeah.
one of his then wives. That was the bottom of the barrel for me.
Wow. And so nothing that's since happened has eclipsed that. That's almost good news.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not that like immediately springs to my mind.
All right, we got several different questions that were along the lines of Nikki Spliffs asking about how you keep on in this sport after some of the displays we saw, the right-wing pro-Trump, pro-terrible villain cabinet displays at UFC 309. I don't know if we have a great answer for this, but here's one sort of on the flip side from Ryan St. John, who says, Chris Peterson, former Washington and Boise State football coach, used to say he wanted to recruit OKGs, or our kind of guys, to his football team. Who in the UFC would we guess are the CME's OKGs? Chucky Olives appears to be one possible recruit based on his post-fight walk past Trump. At least I'm hoping that was intentional. Has anyone else made it obvious they're an OKG? Or is there anyone who has yet to out themselves either direction that we really hope is an OKG and will hopefully not break our hearts at some point down the road? To which I say, man, I don't dare to hope for such a thing at this point. I think the best you can hope for is neutral. If you just don't find out anything about them that makes you go, oh God, this guy. Yeah. And you also, at some point, don't you have to kind of step back and be like, listen, I didn't start paying attention to these guys for their political views. And there's so many of them that have the complete opposite political views of me. Even the ones who when I've talked to and been around in the past, I think seem like good guys. There just must be something in the fighter brain that is drawn to that. And maybe I don't have to understand it. Maybe I just have to try to find a way to ignore it.
Yeah. On the topic of how you stay in the sport, I agree with and was propped up a bit by Luke Thomas, who was like, don't let these fucking assholes chase you away from a thing that you like.
Brian Shea brings this up in his question too about that Luke Thomas kind of talked him off the ledge.
And I kind of believe that not only about MMA, but also about living in America, and more specifically kind of about living in Montana, where politically speaking, we've lost the state. It's over here. Don't let the turds chase you off from a thing that brings you joy. And that's what I'm sticking to right now, even though I fully felt the morning after UFC 309 the same feelings of like, how do they make it so pervasive on the broadcast, right? But that's what I'm sticking to at the moment. And as an addendum to that, I would say, first of all, I was overjoyed to find out that Nate Landwehr is perhaps the most unlikely non-conservative weirdo in the entire UFC. And Raquel Pennington coming out to say she cared about what Sean Strickland said about LGBTQ people and thought it was hurtful and didn't think he should say stuff like that. She earned points in my book for that. And frankly, if there are more fighters that aren't conservative weirdos, I would like to hear from them.
Yeah.
Like, come on out and tell me. Not necessarily Kevin Lee talking about Bernie or whatever, but like, just if the other side can make their statements and do their dances, come with it.
Come with it. All right, we're about 50 minutes in. You know what time it is.
It's Tracy time.
Tracy Dickinson writes, it looks like our boy Alex Pereira is having himself a time in South Korea. His itinerary included showing up at a boxing club, doing some sparring/boxing with somebody that wasn't backing down, posing with a huge bodybuilder, and taking some time to make a video of himself doing a version of the Gangnam Style dance. But what stood out the most to me is somebody that I'm assuming must have asked him to do some body shots and leg kicks on him, and the guy took it like a freaking champ. You see this video?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. And Alex looked like he wasn't holding back, especially with the body shot punches. I have several questions. Do you think the guy had to sign a waiver before letting Alex do this?
No,
do you think the fact that Alex was wearing a boxing glove would actually make it bearable? What kind of positive thoughts did he have going through his mind to distract himself so he didn't curl up in the fetal position? Was he ready for the impressive shade of eggplant that I'm sure his body and left leg were when he woke up in the morning? Finally, is there any type of money that you could be offered that would get you to accept full-force body shots from Alex Pereira with no protection? Or do you prefer to keep all your internal organs intact? Now, this is a thing. It felt like there was a time period earlier in MMA where it became a thing of like, let me get this fighter to put me in a choke or some shit. And then a couple of those went bad. And then there were a couple lawsuits and people stopped doing it wisely.
Yeah.
And then now it seems like people are doing it again.
I mean, this was clearly not just some guy who walked in off the street, right? This was a guy with some experience and with some training, and a guy who doesn't miss the opportunity to do a side plank when he's in the gym. But it was still impressive. It was real impressive to watch this guy take those shots from Alex Pereira, and not only like not fall on the floor and die, but like just no sell it. Like it was nothing to this guy.
I'm not doing that.
No.
Especially because I realize now that I am the age where if Alex Pereira hits me and breaks a rib or something, which is kind of on the low end of bad things that could happen as a result of something like this, I'm gonna be feeling that broken rib when I'm shoveling snow or just in an awkward position or whatever for basically the next 2 decades. Like it's never gonna heal entirely right. So it would have to really be worth it in one way or another. And I don't see Alex Pereira or anybody paying me money so that Alex Pereira could punch me. I don't think that that'd be in anybody's financial interests.
Yeah.
All right, some lightning round before we get out of here. Liddell Yazzie says, "Hey Chad, how are the FCS rankings determined? Is it based off the coaches poll only? I've been following FCS ever since you got me interested with your Grizz 1Z talk segment. Hoping the NAU Lumberjacks crack the top 24 for the playoffs. Is a win over terrible Eastern Washington enough to bump the Jacks up a couple spots to get them near that top 24?"
There are a couple of different FCS polls. Hold on, I'm trying to find out what we're doing over here with the Lumberjacks, just so I can give an informed opinion. There are a couple of different FCS polls, and the real confusing part is that not everyone uses the same one. So you will like tune into the TV broadcast, and they'll use a slightly different poll than the one you might see in the newspaper. Some of them are coaches poll. I believe there's a media poll. And then even in addition to that, the playoff selection committee has their own poll. And so you won't even know basically kind of where your team is ranked or seated until the playoffs like are released, until the seedings are released. So yeah, it's weird. I wish there was more of a standardized kind of thing. Let's see here. NAU is 7-4, so they're a bubble team. They beat Lincoln, California. They lost to Arizona. They beat Utah Tech. They lost to Incarnate Word. They beat Sac State. They lost to Idaho. They lost to Montana. They beat Idaho State. They beat Weber State. Beat Cal Poly. Beat Northern Colorado. Not a ton of what the committee is probably going to think of as quality wins on that list, but beating Eastern Washington makes you like a bubble team. All hope is not lost if you beat Eastern Washington, but it's probably, unfortunately, going to depend on how things finish around the rest of the country, because, other teams winning and losing and improving or reducing their own playoff hopes is going to play a lot into who gets in during the, in the bottom several picks.
Mike Dowling says, commentary dissonance. Hey, after suffering through the Jones-Stipe match on Saturday night and the general awfulness of a Trump Cam UFC event, I went looking for some commentary that would hopefully reflect my dejected feelings about the whole thing. I was so frustrated that the match was essentially exactly what we thought it would be, a lumbering Stipe getting pieced up by a fresher Jones. It didn't really tell us anything about Jones's fighting level, and his constant denying of Aspinall only seemed to add another facet to his not a cool guy in any way persona. So imagine my surprise when heading over to have a listen to the biggest MMA podcast out there in terms of pure numbers. It went in completely the other direction, laying out with much hyperbole the brilliance of Jones's performance and suggesting that it was the most important heavyweight fight at Madison Square Garden since Ali Frazier. I perhaps should have tried to listen on to see if it came more measured, but the complete disconnect between our responses was hurting my brain too much. Do you ever have this completely maddening feeling you're at odds with the world or the world's perception of a thing, and how do you process it? LYBE, Mike. I would say, Mike, I have that feeling more lately than ever.
All the time. You know what? I actually have it in MMA all the time.
Yeah.
And I had it about this one too, where I talked about this. Everyone's glowing response to the Jones fight, where I didn't think he looked that great. Like he looked great against Stipe, but like, unless I'm just crazy or I need to go rewatch the fight, I didn't see a guy who compares to the other top fighters in that weight class right now.
Yeah, and I get it from the UFC commentary perspective. They're company people putting over a narrative for the sake of the company. This is why I every once in a while I feel like, what would it be like if we actually just had commentators who were just hired by the broadcaster, not in any way hired by the company that stands to profit. We just had never really had that in MMA, and there are a lot of things like that where, just sort of the way either somebody who has the megaphone or the people in general are responding to a thing makes me just feel like I'm going fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And as for how to deal with it, I don't know. I mean, maybe the only thing you can do is just remind yourself that this has been probably the case on a lot of different areas where a lot of people were just wrong about a thing or just sharing dumb opinions with each other. But that, I thought a lot about when people praise and talk about what a legendary and visionary figure Muhammad Ali was. How many of those people would have hated Muhammad Ali if they were contemporaries of his at the time, just because, hey, he's refusing the draft, he's a radical black Muslim, all these things that mainstream white America hated. And they definitely would have hated him. Dana White is somebody who would have hated Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali would have hated Dana White if they had to work together. But with the benefit of hindsight later on, they can be like, yeah, we respect him more as an athlete for what he was willing to do because of his beliefs.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't respect it now if somebody came along doing the same thing, doing an equivalent thing.
Do you have time to play a game before we check out?
Okay, sure.
Let's play a game called Does Jon Jones Beat This Person?
Okay.
I'm going to say the name of a fighter, and you tell me yes or no. Does Jon Jones beat this person if they fought tomorrow?
Okay.
Alex Pereira.
Yes.
Tom Aspinall.
Probably.
Really? God, yeah. I'm a hard no on that. I think Tom Aspinall absolutely whips Jones's ass.
I think Jon takes him down, beats him on the ground.
Curtis Blades.
Yes.
Alexander Volkov.
Yes.
Sergey Pavlovich.
Yes.
Jailton Almeida.
You know what? No.
I would say no to almost all of those people.
Really? Curtis Blades? You think he doesn't beat Curtis Blades?
I think fucking Jon Jones Curtis Blades probably murders Jon Jones at this point. What's he going to do to him?
I think Jon Jones keeps it standing and is just faster than Curtis Blades on the feet.
That could be, but I just did not think he looked fast on Saturday. I thought he looked slow, but fast compared to Stipe. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he would absolutely run through this heavyweight division, but I don't think he wants it from those dudes. I really don't. All right. Maybe I'm crazy, but we're done this week with the live chat. We're back tomorrow with Doing the Damn Thing and Friday with the Power Hour. Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate the support. As for right now, we're done.